Don't worry. We're still live here on Thursday, March 26th, and that means it is opening day in the Major League Baseball, and we're celebrating that the Cubs are only down 1-0. We're going to come back because we're going to win 162 and win the World Series. The guests that I have coming on may think the Mets are going to win. They can't spend all the money in the world and get their best win, but we don't know. Maybe they knocked off the Pittsburgh Pirates today, starting off Paul Skeens. You never know. But the big thing about season change, about the weather changing, it's 70 degrees in most places in the northern part of the United States, and the weather starts making us think new things, and we start thinking, man, maybe I should be doing something new, something different. Well, Pierson, our guest here, is not just a full-time POS guy, but he's working toward that, maybe dreaming toward that, but he works a day job. Plus, he's putting in major point of sales in some of the largest restaurants in Manhattan and Long Island and in his home territory of Philadelphia. And let me introduce to you, on the right-hand side of your screen, Mr. Pierson Taylor. Pierson, how are you today? And I'm assuming you have it on your live screen. I have it on mine. The Cubs tied it up 1-1. How are your New York Mets or even your Phillies that are just down the road from you?
We're looking good today. It should be a fun night tonight with the Phillies opener in Philadelphia. No one likes them and they don't care, is the quote that they say. Thanks for having me on this. I know, it's been a long time coming to get me on this show, and so happy to be here and have a nice chat with you.
Yeah, well, this is going to be fun because, one, Pierson and you and I have been in Pierson. Did I say Pierson or person? I said I'm trying to say in person, but probably in Pierson is a little awkward. But we've been together several times, been at, different events that you've been at. And I've kind of learned your story, but I want to, because you have what is a good day job. We're not going to name who you work for, but you're not full-time in payments right now. Tell us kind of where you are in your career, where you're working, and then how did you find this thing called payments to start being part of? And really specifically, you're really, in fact, your email says it, you're the POS guy. Kind of take us through in a short, that journey from where you are in your day job to how you got into this payments world.
Yeah, sure. So, I would say it was probably a decade, maybe a little bit longer, where my career really started to grow in venue operations. So starting in bars, restaurants, both high volume, kind of transitioning into a music venue space as well. Kind of just, your day-to-day operations, a big part of that, including payments, POS, dealing with those changes on a regular daily basis. So dealing with the card processors, which I learned very quickly that was always, for lack of a better word, tedious to try to accomplish certain things as you deal throughout that. Obviously, 2020, COVID comes around, that industry kind of shuts down entirely. I was out of work, just like many others out there. And, I had a longtime friend of mine who had recently started in the payment space. And, we were talking and, brainstorming certain ideas of what to do while everybody was chilling at home with their feet up. And, from what he was telling me, I'm like, hey, I kind of know a little bit about that, tell me more. And so it was full steam ahead, from that conversation. I immediately got involved just to get some, revenue for my own financials started and kind of pivot in that direction, just in case the world didn't come back to normal. Obviously it did. But, getting that oversight into payments and how the back end actually works, and also the profitability that you can make in the space, is very appealing to me.
So when you were in venue management, you're obviously working with the point of sale in the specific venues you work with. You mentioned earlier that Shift 4 often is the provider there, obviously in a competition to our side of the world, but a good competitor and has had a great time. And what did you know about, like, obviously you're working with the POS, I think probably a lot of micros is my guess.
A lot of micros, yeah.
Yeah, and so you have the big micros dealers and working with Shift 4. Did it start to become clear before you talked to Dave and kind of learned what was going on, that there was that Shift 4 was making their money and the micros dealer was making theirs? Did it come sense when you were doing it, or was it mostly just you thought they were running the whole point of sale? Does
Yes,
that
that
make
was
sense, that question? Yeah.
a big eye opener to me. So like prior to that, I just thought it was just like one thing, and you pay this, and I didn't really understand the processing rates per card, Amex, Discover, Visa, Mastercard, all these things that come into play, your monthly costs on POS licenses. I didn't know any of that. So like I said, big eye opener there. Prior to that, like I was on those big micro servers, building the POS menus, pricing, arrangements of the buttons, stuff like that. Micros kind of forced you to do it on your own, so from a customer support level, that was my experience with customer support. And, my big question always with them was like, how do we make this customer support better? And that was kind of selling points now of how we sell our products and our service is that customer service is like, hey, we are not that. We are much more hands-on. Also, a lot of dealing with chargebacks. We're talking high volume bars. How do you protect a business and offer solutions to protect businesses from losing payments in that regard? Because as you well know, if you're not doing that the right way to protect yourself, you're losing that money, probably plus a little bit on top.
What do you like as you've kind of learned this industry? Now you've actually done, the full sales process from building a relationship to closing the deal to on the POS deals, full installation, everything. Um, has it opened your eyes to your like when you're managing venues and working with that? And start because obviously when you're managing a venue, you're not at the top level where they're figuring out how much they're paying on their credit card fees. But do you ever start thinking, man, how much are they? Because I always think about that. You work for a pretty large company that has a lot of venues. They pay a lot of credit card fees, and I think about that, and you think about all the overhead that goes into all these places. One of the biggest pieces is being able to take payments.
Yeah. So again, getting into this industry, I started with, hey, standalone card reader. We weren't really selling those POS solutions, although I had, call it entry level knowledge on the other systems that existed out there. Um, but, we realized from our business channel is that the POS is going to be the real way to, build the relationships with your merchant. And as you mentioned, it's more than just taking payments. Most people think a POS is just a way to take payments. In reality, it's essentially the backbone of the entire operation. And over the past few years, with the amount of time I've spent, installing, fixing the install, reformatting the menus, what I learned is pretty simple. It's that if your POS isn't built around how your business actually runs, um, including things like online ordering, third party delivery, which is huge these days, like that's not helping you. And it could potentially slow you down there as well.
All right, so let's bridge a little bit to now that you're starting to understand and you're starting with terminals and getting into this world of payments. What was your first experience and what was it like when you first did? Because you had experience, with a point of sale when you were managing a venue, but what was your first experience of when you were selling a point of sale? Do you have a memory of what you sold and how that process went when the first time you did it?
Yeah, going back to the card readers, that was actually more of a challenge because you're pitching non-integration. You're telling them, "Hey, you have your POS. Let me give you this terminal to run as a sidecar to your POS. I'll build you a POS button. I'll build a button in your POS to mark this ticket as paid, but you're not running the card through the POS." It was kind of a, not a good situation and a hard pitch because at the end of the day, you want that integration. Um, that is why we kind of shifted into that POS is, number one, there's typically a term associated with that contract. You're going to lock in that business for, call it 3 years or so. Again, the big selling point on POS to me is integrations. When I walk into a place and I see 7 tablets, each running Grubhub, Sauce, Slice, Uber Eats, DoorDash, I'm like, oh, this is going to be easy because I know this business owner is annoyed by this. And I'm sure their current POS has a solution to integrate. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But I'll tell you this right now, if they do, it's going to cost them a lot of money to do that. And that's why these business owners are kind of leaning towards having those standalone tablets to run a probably very significant portion to their revenue these days. So, they all want that to be streamlined and integrated into their POS. So I will say transitioning to the POS sales versus that sidecar terminal, it's made my life a lot easier.
Okay, I want to say in our payments world that you may be one of the few people that say that. I've always thought that because I like to be able to pitch on as many things. I want as many things I can pitch to a business as possible. And when I have something that's controlling their ordering and their menu, and it's controlling their their hiring and the amount of things that it can do, I have more things to pitch on and more things to sell on. But it also has more break points. So can you
Right.
like
Good, good point.
you've had more you've had you're talking about you have to reconfigure a menu. What was the do you have a memory of a point where you're like, oh, this isn't always as smooth as I wish it would be, or maybe it was a support person you couldn't get a hold of? We're going to try not to throw some of the POS systems that you've worked with under the bus, but you're welcome to say positive things about them. But there are times that I know, and I walked through with you sometimes, some like hiccups that happen in this whole system. Are there any memories of those like, oh my word, this is how this works times that you ever had?
Yeah, and I could tell you countless nightmare stories, especially when I was first getting started with these installs. I find the biggest challenge on the installation side of things is the IT and networking. For example, even 2 weeks ago, which now I know how to troubleshoot this, I installed a POS and they had existing wiring from 3 rounds of changing POSs already. So, you got to be able to walk in there to be able to troubleshoot. If you don't know how to do that, I've found that there's certain, call it Angie's List for IT workers that you can go out and kind of outsource people that may have more of an IT background for you to help you with that wiring. Super important to get in there ahead of time and get an eye on that before. You don't want to go in blind to these installs. But yes, first week or two, that is definitely a challenge compared to just putting a terminal in there and writing the file and punching in a number and all that stuff. But it's just going to come from experience. And yeah, I know you mentioned back to the pitching part of it. Why I find that easier is you know the POS. Let me backtrack here. When you're selling that card terminal, at least from my experience, what I was selling was processing. I was selling less fees or no fees. We've gotten to a point where I feel a good majority of businesses have either adopted some or all forms of passing the fee to your customer, whatever you want to call it, cash discount, dual pricing, compliance surcharging, whatever the case may be. My pitch now really doesn't talk about that. That's almost like a secondary feature to let merchants know that, hey, by the way, after all this awesome stuff I said about this POS I'm pitching to you, we're also going to do this for you. And, financially wise, you're going to really see some improvement in your business here. For me, a basic POS pitch is going to be a basic POS pitch, which is what I don't do, is someone going in there and just selling features. Every POS is going to have its features. For me, I'm pitching a solution to them to solve their operational problems. As far as demo goes, you really want to get people on demos to do this. Anyone can do a demo. Anyone can get on a call for an hour. That doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work in a live environment. So I'm approaching this to kind of look at their entire ecosystem of their business versus coming in there with a terminal. We're talking, hey, we have in-house ordering on your website, bar versus kitchen operations, third-party integrations, as I mentioned. And then obviously the payment processing and reporting, that's a big benefit of going with us as well. Here are the 3 programs you could use to offset your fees on top of that.
What I love about what you were just saying there is that you're bringing a multifaceted approach to the businesses you're serving. As you've done this, and I actually don't know this because I know most of the stories I've heard from you are restaurants. Have you done any non-restaurant POS at this point?
We have some salons. We're working with some POS companies that have kind of built on their salon side of booking and wait lists and stuff like that. I'm currently working on a huge account in Philadelphia that does, you know, 200K plus for a barber shop in Philadelphia. You can imagine the lines out the door. They got people like hanging out in just waiting in their chairs all day in a neighborhood that has plenty of things where if you can walk in, put your name on a wait list, go explore the neighborhood, that's going to generate more revenue for your neighbors while, you know, our clientele is waiting for you. They'll send that text message out for you and you come back and you get your haircut or your shave or whatever the case may be there.
All right, so I love it. Dan's in here. One, hopefully, Dan, my sound is, he was saying I was a little quiet. I was having some feedback issues, so I brought my sound up. So let me know if that sounds better. He has he has two things that he's been saying. I'm intrigued by the capability of integrating multiple providers into one centralized POS. Can you unpack that a bit more? So we'll answer that question. I'll bring up a second question he did. And can you give me a 2-minute overview of your POS versus Toast presentation, which I love. Everybody wants this. Like, I want the perfect silver bullet that's going to kill the toast, or burn the toast, I guess I should say. But let's start with that. One of the things, because you have the full, like when you're running a micros at a venue, like you've been managing it, I mean, you're spitting out multiple reports. You're managing inventory. You're also managing the payroll that's probably coming through there and the clock in and clock out, probably managing the scheduling. It's doing, if you're doing third party delivery, everything's coming in and out of there. When you say that you're bringing multiple providers into one centralized POS, how are you presenting that, and how are you making that as a pitch to the merchant, the why that's better than having four tablets on the counter and a computer that has six different softwares to run everything?
Sure. I mean, you're talking, if those systems aren't talking to each other clearly, you're going to be open to some form of chaos in your business, whether it's duplicate tickets, missed orders, staff confusion, or communication with your kitchen. There's why wouldn't you want to streamline all of these things in? And as I mentioned before, most modern POSs right now have either direct integration or some third party platform that they're going to integrate to offer all of these services direct to the POS. My goal is to kind of find that where it's really not breaking the bank, because I do find that a lot of these companies are taking advantage of a lot of merchants in upselling these third-party programs in order to be able to accomplish these things.
And then let's go into that other question. This is a question I don't know. Have you replaced a Toast? Oh, actually, I know you replaced a Toast because you replaced Toast in New York City and Manhattan there,
Yep.
at the name that I totally am missing right now, the Irish pub there. So what has been able to, as you've done that, what have you used to overcome some of the objections to, I don't want to leave Toast, or I love Toast, or maybe it's indifference and I don't want to make a big change? And what system are you using to do that with Toast, to beat Toast?
Yeah. So yeah, listen, I'm not going to sit here and trash Toast. I've used Toast before in management and service. We're talking, 12, 13 years ago. And I loved it. But what I didn't see in those positions of what it's actually costing the merchant, what I didn't see in those situations are, the fine print and contractual terms that Toast has, and being able to kind of raise their rates from time to time as they see fit. And by the time, they get deeply rooted in your business, that's obviously going to be harder to get it out of there. I would say, 3-4 years ago, I've been walking into places and they're like, nope, I got Toast. I love it. I'm never getting rid of it. I have seen that mindset change a little bit. I do think it is directly related to pricing increases, paired with general inflation, and businesses feeling it a little bit more, and businesses trying to, even if they can knock off a little bit per month, and, especially with their processing, they can do that. Toast is offering, compliance surcharging now, But at the end of the day, I think there is some service fees associated in order to do that. Once I switched Toast, and Nate, to answer your question, I would say if I had to pick one POS to compete with them right now, it would be Quick POS. They offer a restaurant platform that is pretty comparable as far as coursing, seat numbers. What I do find is that the challenges is that in the setup, what I do recommend is getting the things that you might not think about. For example, how does your kitchen ticket print out? That's something Toast does very well. If you can take that ticket and bring it to, a POS company that you're trying to pitch to a business and say, hey, can you match this setup on how this is being relayed to the cooks to cook this food? Hey, on a reporting, I really like the way the reporting looks. If I open up my Toast app on my phone, I can easily see today, last week, best-selling items like really instantaneously on my phone. Can you do that? And it's finding those POS companies, which Quick POS does pretty well in competing with that and offering those services there. Not to say I have had zero issues of getting someone off of Toast, but for the most part, I would say 90% of the merchants that I am switching off of Toast, which I believe it's probably more than 20 now. Very few issues on the back end transitioning them over.
All right, so here's, I think, my hardest question that will be today, because it's hard to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. But what do you think is some of the secret sauce that you have in your pitches that make your pitches more successful because of your experience of managing venues and actually being a user and a consumer of POS versus those who are selling POS and have never had that experience? And so kind of the backwards way of saying it is, why are some of the pitches failing for some of these partners because they don't have your experience? And can you kind of identify a few of those things that you're able to put into your pitch that makes you successful?
Yeah, everybody wants a guy, right? So that I'm starting with that. I'm like, do you have a guy that oversees this for you? Do you have a guy that stays on top of all the compliance rules for you? Do you have someone that you can call their cell phone instead of waiting on customer service and going through that process while you're in the middle of operating your business? Those are the questions I kind of lead with. It's all about kind of, do you have this relationship? Not, hey, do you want to change your POS? And once that conversation is started and that relationship is established, you can kind of show them everything that exists outside of those big three: Toast, Clover, Square. You could throw Micros in there too, because it is a big one, especially for high volume businesses there. That pitch needs to be established relationship wise before you're getting in technology. I find that most people trying to sell something, they don't really read between the lines and they don't ask the right questions once they have them hooked on the relationship. So for example, where you get trust, where you lose trust is like, if you're not asking how delivery, online ordering, and in-house service all connect, you're missing the real risk points in establishing, what they're looking for in that change. That's usually where the deal might quietly die, is if you're not building on the deeper rooted questions outside of what does this POS actually do.
And I think one of the things I've noticed in the Toast world is separate, because I think when you say, do you have that guy? So here in Indianapolis, most likely how the Toast was sold was either a referral from a business or from a bartender that knows the bar manager at the other bar that's going to put it in, or a referral from Gordon Food Service. So it was the same salesperson that came in and sold them their bulk lettuce and their frozen meat that also was helping them try to sell the POS. And here in Indy, this is not probably always true in Philly, because I'm going to guess they have local install teams. But the install team that installs anything for Toast here in Indianapolis comes from Oklahoma City. So you don't have, so in so many of these places, when you say, do you have a guy? Yeah, I have a guy that the person, one, who sold it to you isn't a person that has anything to do with the POS company. Two, they brought in another person that's going to sell it, but once you're installed, they're not going to touch that ever again because they were just part of the sales team. And the install team came from another city. And so when you're able to put yourself, and putting yourself yourself with the expertise. You're separating yourself. And you sounded so much. I know you've been around Brian Linke sometimes. That's his thing. He's every time he's like, I've got a guy. I've got a guy, and everybody wants that. And to be able to say, I've got the person who's going to take care of that for me, even though Pierson's learned, this is that a lot of times you're the guy, but you're only as good as the phone call you're making to the POS company to be able to get that fixed. How have you navigated with that support system that isn't always perfect because, it's POS. Sometimes POS is a POS. How have you navigated that?
Yeah. So, obviously, if I'm placing a product, the first questions I ask before I place it is, hey, what's your customer service? I'll even do a few test calls and see how quick they pick up the phone, how quick they respond to an email, stuff like that. At the end of the day, if I'm putting myself in a position where I want to help a merchant solve customer service issues, and I'm the one essentially making those calls and fixing it on the back end for them, my time is money also. So if a POS company isn't going to, offer that customer support there, I'm probably not going to place it. That is kind of one of the biggest complaints, and reasons to switch over as well. Even with a big company, I hear, oh, Toast customer service is awesome. I also hear, oh, Toast customer service is crap. So which one is it? I don't know. I don't have any, I don't work for Toast. I've never placed a Toast. I've never had to call Toast customer service. So I don't know where that discrepancy is coming through. And again, nothing's perfect. You're going to have good days. You're going to have bad days. I find a really good thing on the customer service side of things that should be a necessity. Is a ticketing system. The last thing is you don't want to bring up an issue and then, a couple of days go by and you call back to check up on it and a different person picks up and they have no idea what you're talking about and you're starting from square one. So, I think a lot of companies are putting effort into their customer service, call it operations, and making sure that whatever issues are dealt with, if it's not immediately resolved, there is essentially a paper trail of what you're dealing with.
Yep. And Dan continues to ask good questions. And I know this is something you guys have specifically dealt with because you work in the pizza capital of the world there in the Northeast. And don't call it New York pizza. It's just pizza is what everybody always tells me. It's not New York style pizza. It's just pizza. But pizza menus can be one of the most challenging things out there. And I know you guys have been navigating around it because there's a competitor out there in the world that you guys have to fight against that's very good at what they do, but they don't sell through reseller channels. I know you've been working on that. What have you been learning, and how have you been learning that you can? You've had some recent installs to be able to get into some pizza shops.
The reality is there's so many ways to run a pizzeria. It's crazy. Like, you can press a button and the sizes pop up. You can press a button and it goes to a whole modifier screen that has sizes, toppings, half pepperoni, half plain. There's so many ways to customize that. It's so important that you go in and you talk to the pizzeria business owner and you ask specifically what they want. Now, in that communication, obviously you cannot off the bat promise something that you don't know if you're going to be able to pull off, but having that reassurance, be like, hey, it might be a little bit different here, but you're getting X, Y, and Z that you don't have, which is going to increase your revenue by X amount. They might consider it not being the same way that they have it. Also with pizzerias, you have delivery driver management, which is a big one for us recently. There's some systems out there that have driver tracking, which if you're a pizzeria and you have it, there's no way you're not going to have that anymore. You are so used to this and being able to see where your drivers are in real time. There's not many systems out there that offer that, but they do exist. And our Switch to Save channel has been doing our best to track down the companies that are going to offer those as solutions, where if they do switch and their quote unquote menu might be tweaked a little bit, at least they have those driving revenue features that they still have.
All right, so as we kind of close out here and learning, and Pierson, you've been awesome trying to give the insight of how you're having this learning curve. Where do you think things are going for POS? Where do you see it for yourself? What are some of your dreams of how things can improve and sales can become easier and installs become more prevalent? What are some of your dreams as you're moving in this POS world?
Yeah, no, the majority of our accounts, we are on some sort of fee offsetting program. It's really great to see with the new technology that's coming out, how different companies are kind of displaying that, whether it's on the reporting side for the business and also the guest facing side for the customer. Obviously, you want a good customer experience coming in. You don't want them to feel like you're charging them to use their card. There are very user friendly ways to accomplish that. As long as that can kind of keep going in the direction that it's going and that software continues to improve, it seems like every POS company has jumped on board to some extent. I'm excited to kind of see where that is all going, and how what they can do for someone selling their product to make their job easier.
All right. So one of the things that I like to always ask our partners, and that just kind of feels, what do you do for fun? What are things outside of your day job, outside of, what are some of the things that bring you enjoyment that aren't going and selling POS and crawling around and drawing Ethernet cables around the back of large buildings?
I'm working a lot, so I just like when I can take that 10 days, 2 weeks to go somewhere, I'll go on that vacation. I've been frequenting Costa Rica lately. It's my new favorite spot. Um, I'm a musician as well. I love going to concerts. I love just hanging back, strumming the guitar, writing some music on like a MIDI keyboard on my Apple, stuff like that. Just something to kind of like whatever can distract me from my typical 60-hour 70-hour work week is what I would call what I do for fun.
Well, one, we're so thankful to have you part of the PayProTec family. We're excited to see what your future continues to hold as you continue to learn and grow and continue to sell. As we close this up, for someone who's maybe in a place like you were, and hopefully not during a COVID and not out of a job when you make a phone call. We don't want them there, but they have a day job. They're successful at what they do, but they're maybe considering to start a side hustle and or make a big jump. Why should someone consider or not consider being part of selling point of sale?
I'm trying to recruit people every day. I'm not even kidding. Like every conversation I have with could be friends, could be people that are hourly employees at my day job that they're looking for extra revenue. The money's there, and as long as it doesn't take a long time to learn this stuff, if you just sit down, put like a week, maybe 2 weeks into running a pitch, learning features. I find that a lot of restaurant industry people are perfect to get into this job. They're regularly working with POS systems. They don't really see the credit card processing and stuff like that. All they really care about is their tips. But if they have a really not a good weekend tip wise, and they're like, oh no, I don't want to work here anymore, and the tips aren't good, and obviously a knee jerk reaction there. I'm always jumping in. I'm like, hey, well, let me tell you about this, because with our workload increasing on a weekly basis, we are regularly trying to find people to get out there, learn the industry, bring us some deals, trust us that we can obviously reward them in certain extents. And then, if we find a real all-star, we'll even consider, bringing them into our channel to, work permanently with us. So a lot of opportunity in the space. I feel like there's a lot of youth out there that doesn't even know about this. So I'm approaching, call it, 22 to 28-year olds, letting them know about, this business and, the opportunities that are out there. And, the feedback's been relatively positive. We've had some people just, hey, my dad owns a pizza shop. Let me get you in contact with him. Something as simple like that. We'll give them a referral bonus. They're like, oh my God, $500. Wow. And then, that'll kind of financially motivate them to start bringing in more deals, which we've seen definitely some results of that.
Well, I certainly hope that what you're seeing, and I don't know why my video got small, so let me, some reason I did something that screwed everything up. Look at that. We'll just go live here and a little change. But one of the things I've seen is like yourself, your team at Switch to Save, what you're doing. You're bringing a younger ethos into what we're doing, and really this was an old man's game because we don't advertise this industry exists for as much as we probably should, but also we like kind of like hiding under the weeds, and we're quietly making the 50 to 150 basis points on every transaction and just keep going there. But it's a great industry to be involved in. There's a lot of opportunity, and it's one of those industries that really does, the more work you put into it, it really does give equity, and it gives you actually an opportunity. The energy and the energy you put into it, it will come back to you. It doesn't mean it's easy, and the sales, as you now have been doing this several years and been involved with Switch to Save and the team, is there any other, like, that's why they should be, is there a tip or trick that was really helpful that you wished you had learned earlier? That's my last question.
Honestly, like, it's just kind of like the psychological aspect of it. It's setting goals. It's writing these goals down. It's following up on trying to learn something from every deal that you get. If you're not learning at least one thing from each new merchant that you get, even if it's on like a personality level, let's be real, every single merchant you deal with is going to be a different personality type. It's not getting turned away by maybe a bad conversation. I would say, that's something I definitely learned from, early on is, conversations that didn't really go so well, I kind of started to, doubt myself. But at the end of the day, I realized that was just the merchant. That wasn't necessarily me. And, I can back that up by the deals that continue to roll in after that. So I would just advise, don't let one or two no's, deflate your momentum. Keep your foot on the gas. Like I said, keep practicing your pitch, keep trying to learn something, and, the world is yours.
Awesome. Well, Glenn Pierson, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for being part of all that we do here. Here's what I really believe. I believe you're nearly up to, we're going to see a big, good to great jump here very soon for all that you're doing. You guys have really gotten some good opportunities, some good referral partners, some places, the businesses you've put in some of these POS systems that we're going to see some huge growth from the Switch to Save team and the team there in Philly and Long Island and New York. And can't wait to see how this continues to grow. Thank you so much for joining us.
You mentioned I'm not full-time. Trust me, I'm full-time right now. I'm just doing full-time times two.
Yes, yeah. It's not, yeah, exactly. Pierson's rolling 2 full-time jobs. That's how good he is. So, and killing it at both, I guarantee. So on behalf of PayProTec, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for being part of our family. If you're interested in learning more about what we're doing here at PayProTec, or maybe learning POS, if you already a member and a partner of PayProTec, just reach out to your relationship manager and they'll connect you with the POS pros, the same people that are helping Pierson and his team continue to grow. If you're not in this industry yet, just go to ppt.partners and schedule a discovery call. See if this is a right fit. It may not be, it may be, but you don't know until you take that next step and see if this is the right fit to get involved in this payments world and see if this might be part of your next step in your career. On behalf of Pierson, I'm Nate Manahan. Thank you guys so much for joining. See you next time on POS Unleashed. Bye, guys.